Mark, can you address this for us?
Here. As far as the hydrologic study, if you're talking about the conditional letter of map revision, they're working to finalize that, and their summary, and that should be ready to be submitted to FEMA probably in the next couple of weeks. We just had a discussion with them again on some modifications, and they're addressing those, and then that's something that they will be submitting to FEMA for FEMA's consideration. Of course, one of the conditions with this approval tonight, if you all approve this, is that any work conducted at this point has to follow the current flood insurance rate map requirements and current regulations that the town has in place dealing with floodplain management, stormwater runoff. I will say that the site plan has a 123-page drainage report, so it's not like they haven't really thoroughly studied the drainage impacts, stormwater effect of the project. The town engineer has indicated to me that he's okay with the drainage calculations that have been submitted for the project. Basically, they're addressing the errors that are in the current flood insurance rate maps because the consultant has hired, the applicant has hired a consultant to come in and more thoroughly study on the ground this area. So obviously, they have found that there's errors in the current maps that we have, and they're updating those and correcting those, and that has to be submitted to FEMA. The end result of what they're proposing should result in improvements in this particular area as far as flooding. So that's kind of where that stands. Yeah, sure. That's me. Yeah.
You're the ones that keep track of the changes from FEMA, and you have to amend our ordinance to maintain that you're enforcing their ordinances, and that's what we do. So that's our protection. And that's the citizens protection, is meeting our very amendment regulations, which is section 8 of chapter 4 of our general government. Just to give that extra background.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's very important for us to not obviously get kicked out of the flood insurance program, because then everybody that has an insurance policy basically loses that. And if they have any flood damage, they're on the bill for 100%. So that's a huge issue, and we want to make sure.
And I know in the past that we have, there have been projects that have come through that we have turned down because they did not meet the FEMA requirements and TDEC requirements in the past. So that's something we're very, very concerned about and very, very aware of.
That's right. And all the work that we can allow them to do, this project at this point is based on our current requirements. And if FEMA for some reason doesn't approve exactly what they've submitted, then they'll have to amend their application and their plans to follow whatever is approved. And go from there. So most of the site can be graded and developed with the current maps. There are some areas however, that would need to be captured on the corrections to the flood insurance rate map. So that's, I don't know if that adequately answers that question or not, but that's kind of where we're at in terms of the stormwater and the hydrologic study. As far as the performance bond, the town always requires a letter of credit, an irrevocable letter of credit actually, for erosion control before they get a grading permit, so that if they disturb areas and something happens and the project falls apart, the town has the ability to draw on that letter of credit and correct the areas that have been disturbed. And we also require at the end of the project a 2-year maintenance letter of credit that relates to stormwater infrastructure. So that's something that we would review 2 years after all the infrastructure is in place and make sure that it's working properly. And if it's not, we have issues, and we will ask the developer to take care of those, or whoever holds the letter of credit, before we can release their letter of credit. We also have started recently implementing the stormwater maintenance agreements, and that's more just, working with property owners to make sure that they have a plan in place for long-term maintenance of their stormwater infrastructure. So I think the town has a lot of controls in place with what we have and what we require of all developments equally. So that's something that I'm pretty comfortable with. As far as a deed restriction goes, it's, really if the applicant is, wants to commit to restricting what happens on the property now or in the future, then, they could certainly, move forward with having conversation with the town and the town attorney to see what, what could be developed in that regard. It's something that we wouldn't, it wouldn't be typical of, dealing with developments as far as imposing a deed restriction on a project. So basically, again, if the applicant wants to commit to certain restrictions, then they can certainly do that, and we can work with them and with the town attorney to develop some, some language that would address that. That would be the best way to do it, because then the applicant has actually agreed to, place these restrictions on their property. The applicant has stated at a number of public meetings that they have no intention of adding any more multifamily buildings to this development than what's shown with the current plans.
Mark, can I address the PCD? That's where our protections are as a town, as this is the zoning ordinance.
I was going to get to that too.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. If you want, you can.
The PCD provides a lot of flexibility to the developer, but it also provides a lot of control for the town. One of the things that in the PCD is under general conditions, by acceptance of approval of PCD zoning, the applicant agrees to conditions set forth in this section as part of such approval. As part of the approval of the PCD district, the town may require the following: rearrangement of structures, open space, driveways, and parking areas, modification of densities, setbacks, and buffering, and limitations of specific commercial uses. So we have a lot of leeway to, even when they're working through their planning, to say, okay, we want these buildings moved here, or this road moved here, or what have you. But also, his development plan has been approved as it is. So if Mr. Cullom wants to come back and add something to it, that's called a major modification, and he would have to get approval from both the the MPC and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to make any changes. Now, the second reading or the first reading, we struggled through, we wanted to restrict, we had a conversation that we wanted to restrict multifamily to just what is, we didn't want to see anymore. And so we went back and forth and struggled with, because it was a rezoning, almost like you would have to do a text amendment to the zoning ordinance to enforce that restriction in that, and we realized that that was becoming unwieldy when we actually have the protections already built into the PCD zoning ordinance to say, you have to come back to us anyway. And you've just heard us talk for 20 minutes that we don't want to see any more multifamily. So I don't think he'll be bringing back multifamily because he knows what the answer will be. That's one thing. And then we have the land use plan. There's concern that in 10 years, they'll come in and take all the commercial out and put in multifamily. Our land use plan calls for this area to be mixed use. You take out all the retail, and then it's no longer mixed use, it's singular use, which is not what our land use plan calls for. So there is really, to me, that opportunity is not there as well. So that's where our protections are for the town. It's in our regulatory, the processes that we have, the planning, the ordinances that we have, the subdivision regulations, the architectural design guidelines, all of that stuff is where the protections for our community and how we enforce how things are built out in our community. So I hope that was, okay.
Yeah, I mean, in relation to what the property was zoned before it was rezoned to planned commercial, there's a lot more embedded protection to the community with the PCD, because like Vice Mayor Paulman said, they have to go through two different bodies if they propose a major change. And anything on those areas that are shown as undeveloped is going to have to come to both the Planning Commission and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. So, you know, it's a two-board process.
Or any changes to this development
Or
plan.
changes
Say if-
that would
if-
be major.
Yeah,
to this
if the
development.
the
Right.
flood,
That's right.
the changes aren't approved by FEMA, then they'd have to abide by the
right.
current flood maps.
That's right.
Which would require them to come back and address any changes they would need to make to that plan. So,
That's right.
yeah.
So I don't know if that adequately answers your all's questions at this point.